There's a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you've done and everything to do with how much you're still reaching for. The feeling lives in the space between closing one browser tab and opening another, between finishing one thing and immediately wondering what's next. And it's the sensation of standing in your own life like you're waiting in a lobby, as if the real thing, the true beginning, is still ahead of you, just beyond this next achievement, this next change, this next version of yourself. The searching has gone on so long that it's become invisible, woven into the fabric of your daily rituals. The way you scroll through other people's lives at 2 a.m, not quite sure what you're looking for, but certain you'll know it when you see it. Your routines get rearranged, your goals shift, your entire existence gets reconfigured, all in the hope that this time, this particular configuration will finally click into place and deliver that elusive sense of arrival you've been chasing. And here's what makes it so quietly devastating. The search never announces itself as a search. It disguises itself as ambition, as self-improvement, as staying informed, as keeping your options open. And it whispers that you're being responsible, strategic, growth-oriented. The discomfort you feel isn't the searching itself, it convinces you, but rather the proof that you haven't found it yet, whatever it is. The ancient Greeks had a word, akrasia, the act of acting against your better judgment. But there's no word for this particular modern affliction, the compulsion to keep moving even when you're not sure where you're going. What we lack is language for the inability to rest in what is, because what is has never quite felt like enough. Not dramatically insufficient, just subtly, persistently incomplete, like a song that never resolves to its final chord. Experiences accumulate, relationships come and go, accomplishments stack up alongside possessions, and still that quiet hum of not yet persists beneath everything. The job came, the relationship arrived, the apartment materialized, the body transformed, the life you imagined took shape. And maybe the feeling did disappear for a moment. Maybe there was a brief exhale, a fleeting sense of peace. But then, so quickly, you barely noticed the transition. The horizon moved again, and the finish line revealed itself to be just another starting point. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill, the way humans adapt to positive changes and return to a baseline level of happiness. But that clinical term doesn't capture the actual feeling. What it misses is the particular loneliness of realizing that you've been running towards something that keeps reconfiguring itself the moment you get close, that you've been promised by every message you've ever absorbed, that satisfaction exists, that arrival is possible, that somewhere out there is the combination of circumstances that will finally let you rest. The cruelty isn't that you want things, because wanting is human, natural, even beautiful. What's cruel is that you've been conditioned to believe that wanting is a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be understood. That the answer to your restlessness exists outside of you, in the next experience, the next transformation, the next carefully curated version of a life that looks, from the outside, like it should feel like enough. And so the searching continues, not with the wild hope of the beginning, but with something quieter and more desperate, the fear that if you stop, if you finally stand still, you'll have to confront the possibility that the thing you've been searching for doesn't exist. Or worse, that it was here all along, hidden in the ordinary moments you were too busy searching to notice. This is where you are now, tired of searching, but terrified of stopping, aware that something is wrong with this endless reaching, but unable to see another way of being. Somewhere between resignation and hope, you keep moving forward, because forward is the only direction that still feels like it might lead somewhere. The question isn't whether you'll stop searching, but whether you can bear to look closely enough at the search itself to understand what you're really looking for and why, after all this time, after all this effort, you still haven't found it. You weren't born restless. There was a time, brief and barely remembered, when you existed in the world without the constant need to become something other than what you were. And if you watch any infant, you'll see it. That complete absorption in the present moment, that lack of self-consciousness, that absence of the question, is this enough? Once upon a time, you were capable of simply being. But then something happened. So gradually you didn't notice the transition, and the world began teaching you that love was conditional, that worthiness was earned, that your value was tied to what you did rather than what you were. Maybe the lesson came subtly, a parent's face lighting up when you achieved something, dimming into distraction when you were simply existing. Or maybe it came explicitly through rewards for performance and disappointment for ordinariness. Either way, you learned the fundamental equation that would shape the rest of your life. That who you are isn't enough, but who you could become might be. This is where the search begins, not in ambition or curiosity, but in a wound, in the quiet, persistent feeling that acceptance from others, from yourself, from the world, is something that must be pursued rather than something you inherently deserve. And because this lesson was learned so early, before you had language to question it, it became not just a belief, but a blueprint, the architecture of your entire psychological life, built on the foundation of conditional worthiness. Evolutionary psychologists will tell you that humans are hardwired for perpetual striving, that our ancestors survived because they were never satisfied, always scanning for threats and opportunities, and there's truth in that. But that ancient survival mechanism, designed to keep us alert in genuinely dangerous environments, has been hijacked by a modern world that profits from your dissatisfaction, and the same instinct that once helped you survive now keeps you scrolling, shopping, comparing, upgrading, optimizing, searching for safety in a world that has engineered your sense of scarcity. And here's what happens in your brain when you search. Dopamine floods your system, not when you find what you're looking for, but in the anticipation of finding it. The neuroscience is clear. Wanting and liking are different systems entirely, which means you're biochemically rewarded for the hunt itself, and the search becomes self-perpetuating. You're not broken for never feeling satisfied, but responding exactly as you were designed to respond, in an environment that has learned to exploit that design. Add to this the particular cruelty of the digital age, where you're not just comparing yourself to the people in your immediate environment anymore, but to a curated, filtered highlight reel of human existence. Every version of success, beauty, happiness, and achievement is instantly visible, instantly accessible, instantly reminding you of all the ways your life doesn't measure up. And social comparison theory tells us that we determine our own worth through comparison with others. But the theory was developed before you could compare yourself to millions of others, at any moment, in the most vulnerable hours of your night. So you search for the career that will make you feel valuable, the relationship that will make you feel chosen, the body that will make you feel acceptable, the life that will finally silence the voice that whispers you're falling behind. And maybe you find these things, maybe you achieve them, and then you discover the arrival fallacy, the psychological phenomenon where achieving a goal doesn't deliver the lasting satisfaction you expected, because the goal was never really about the thing itself. What you were really after was finally earning the permission to feel okay, to feel enough, to stop striving and start living. But that permission never comes from external achievements, which is why the search never ends, and you keep moving the goalposts, not because you're greedy or broken, but because you're trying to solve an internal problem with external solutions. You're trying to earn something, your own acceptance, your own sense of worthiness, that can never be earned because it was never supposed to be conditional in the first place. This is the inheritance you didn't ask for. A nervous system shaped by ancient threats, a psychology formed by conditional love, a life unfolding in an environment designed to keep you perpetually hungry. And beneath all of it, so deep you barely notice it anymore, is a child who learned too early that rest was risky, that stillness meant falling behind, that the only safety available was in constant movement toward an ever-receding horizon. You're not searching because something is wrong with you, but because you were taught that something is wrong with you, and that if you could just find the right thing, achieve the right goal, become the right version of yourself, you could finally fix it. The tragedy is that the teaching itself is the wound, and the search, no matter how far it takes you, can never heal a wound it doesn't know exists. If you could name it, the thing you're actually searching for, what would you call it? Not the surface answers, not the goals you list when someone asks about your ambitions, but deeper than that, beneath the career and the relationship and the perfect apartment and the version of yourself that finally has it together. What is the feeling you imagine will arrive when you finally stop searching? Peace, maybe, or wholeness, or the sense that you're finally enough, exactly as you are, or the permission to exhale and exist without the constant, low-grade anxiety that you should be doing more, being more, becoming more. You're not searching for things at all, really, but for a state of being, a way to feel in your own life that doesn't require constant vigilance, constant improvement, constant proof of your worth. But here's the sleight of hand you've been living with. You've externalized what is fundamentally an internal need, convinced yourself, or been convinced by a world that profits from this confusion, that feelings can be achieved through circumstances. If you arrange your external life correctly enough, you tell yourself, your internal life will finally align, and wholeness is something you build rather than something you uncover. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote about the difference between pursuing happiness and pursuing meaning. And happiness, he observed, cannot be pursued, but ensues. Happiness is the byproduct of living in alignment with something deeper than circumstance. But we've built entire lives around the pursuit of happiness, as if it were a destination, a thing to be captured and held, and in that pursuit, we miss the very thing we're seeking. What you're really searching for isn't out there, but the feeling of being at home in yourself, the experience of enoughness that doesn't depend on external validation, the quiet confidence that you're allowed to exist without earning it, without proving it, without constantly demonstrating your value to a world that will never stop asking for more. But here's what makes the search so persistent. Stillness is terrifying. If you stop moving, stop striving, stop filling every moment with progress and plans and possibilities, you'll have to feel what you've been running from. The fear that maybe you're ordinary. The grief of dreams that didn't materialize the way you imagined. The uncomfortable truth that you've spent years becoming someone you thought you should be, rather than discovering who you actually are. The search protects you from that confrontation. And as long as you're in motion, you never have to face the possibility that you've been searching in the wrong direction entirely. That the life you have right now, with all its imperfections and ordinariness, might be the only life there is, and that accepting it might require a kind of courage you're not sure you possess. So wholeness gets pursued in the next relationship, as if another person could complete what feels incomplete in you, and worthiness gets chased through achievements, as if external success could silence internal doubt, and peace gets sought in circumstances, as if the right combination of conditions could deliver what only self-acceptance can provide. And underneath all of it is the most human fear of all, the fear that if you stop searching, if you finally arrive at where you are, you'll discover that you're alone with yourself, and that yourself, as it is without the future you're working toward and the past you're running from, might not be enough. That the ordinariness of your actual life, stripped of its potential and its narrative of progress, might be unbearable. So you stay in motion and keep searching, not because you believe you'll find it, necessarily, but because the search itself has become your identity, your purpose, your protection from the vulnerability of simply being here, now as you are. The question, then, isn't what you're searching for, but what you're afraid you'll find if you stop. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from treating everything in your life as temporary, and you've learnt to hold your relationships lightly, always aware of their imperfections, always measuring them against some imagined ideal. You're present but not entirely, and part of you is already elsewhere, scanning the horizon for something better, something more aligned with who you're still trying to become. You tell yourself you're keeping your options open, that you're being smart, strategic, realistic about the fact that people grow and change and sometimes grow apart. But what you don't say, even to yourself, is that commitment terrifies you. Not because you fear the wrong choice, but because choosing means arriving, and arriving means you can no longer blame your dissatisfaction on not having found the right person, the right place, the right circumstances. Arriving means confronting whether the restlessness was ever about external conditions at all. So your relationships become way stations, beautiful sometimes, but never quite home. And you love people while simultaneously maintaining a catalogue of their inadequacies, just in case you need a reason to leave when the restlessness becomes unbearable. You're always a little bit elsewhere, even in your most intimate moments, especially in your most intimate moments. The same pattern plays out in your work. And how many careers have you considered? How many versions of your professional life have you mapped out in the quiet hours, imagining that this path might be the one that finally feels right? Skills and experiences accumulate, but you struggle to commit deeply to any single direction because commitment means closing doors, and closing doors means accepting limitation. And accepting limitation means reconciling yourself to being someone specific rather than someone potential. So, you remain perpetually flexible, perpetually available for the next opportunity, the next pivot, the next version of yourself that might finally align with that image you've been carrying. But here's what you've lost in all that flexibility: depth, mastery, the particular satisfaction that comes from choosing something and staying with it long enough to see what exists on the other side of difficulty and doubt. You've optimized yourself into exhaustion, and your life has become a project of perpetual improvement, better habits, better routines, better versions of yourself, and you track and measure and adjust, always aware of the gap between who you are and who you imagine you should be. And maybe you've made progress. Maybe you're objectively healthier, more productive, more disciplined than you've ever been. But are you happier, or have you just found more sophisticated ways to feel inadequate? The cruelty is that the self-optimization never ends, because every improvement reveals a new inadequacy, and every goal achieved is immediately replaced by the next one. Becoming better, you thought, would deliver peace, but it's only delivered new standards to fail to meet, and you've turned yourself into a product that's never quite ready for market, always in development, always one upgrade away from finally being acceptable. And through all of this, the conditional relationships, the tentative career paths, the endless self-improvement, you've been missing something so obvious you can barely see it: your actual life. Not the life you're building toward, not the future version that will finally justify all this striving, but the life that's happening right now, in the moments you're too busy searching to fully inhabit. The mornings where the light comes through your window in that particular way, the conversations that don't lead anywhere but feel true while they're happening. The ordinary Tuesday evenings that contain nothing remarkable except the fact of your existence, your breathing, your brief time on this planet that's already passing faster than you can track. You're haunted by the feeling that you're missing it, that while you've been so focused on finding the right life, your actual life has been unfolding without your full attention, that you've been living in a perpetual state of preparation for a beginning that never comes, because you've defined beginning as somewhere other than here, someone other than who you are. This is the price of eternal searching. You become a ghost in your own life, present but not quite here, living but always leaning forward into some imagined future where you'll finally be ready, finally be enough, finally be allowed to stop and simply be. And the years accumulate, and the searching continues. And somewhere beneath, The exhaustion is the terrifying suspicion that you've been running from the only thing that could ever make you whole. The courage to arrive at where you already are. There's a difference, subtle but essential, between healthy striving and compulsive searching. And one moves towards something while the other runs from something. One creates while the other escapes. One expands your capacity for being alive while the other protects you from actually feeling it. Learning to tell the difference requires a kind of honesty you might not be ready for, and it requires asking yourself, in the middle of your searching, what you're actually afraid would happen if you stopped. Not forever, not dramatically, just for a moment, just long enough to notice where you actually are. This is the practice no one tells you about, because it can't be monetized, can't be optimized, can't be turned into content that promises transformation. And it's the practice of being exactly where you are, exactly as you are, without the narrative of progress, without the story of becoming, without the constant reassurance that this moment is building towards something better. It's the practice of enoughness in a world that profits from your sense of lack. And it's uncomfortable. God, is it uncomfortable? Because when you stop moving, even briefly, you feel everything you've been running from. The grief, the disappointment, the fear that your ordinary life, with all its beautiful mundane details, might not be the exceptional story you've been telling yourself you're working toward. The possibility that this, right here, right now, in all its imperfection, might be it. Not a stepping stone to something else, but just it. But here's what happens in that discomfort. If you can stay with it, you begin to notice what was always there beneath the searching, a kind of basic okayness that doesn't depend on circumstances. Not happiness, necessarily, not the transcendent peace that spiritual teachers promise, and that always seems just out of reach, just the simple, quiet fact of your existence, your breathing, your aliveness, the way you're here now, regardless of whether you've earned it or deserve it or optimized yourself into someone worthy of it. This is what they don't tell you about presence. It's not a state you achieve, but a willingness to stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of some future version of your life. It's the gradual, unglamorous work of building tolerance for reality as it is, for yourself as you are, for the fact that your life will never be perfect, never be complete, never match the imagined ideal you've been carrying like a blueprint for happiness. And in that tolerance, something shifts. Not dramatically, not in a way that would make a good story, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to notice that the search was never about finding something, but about avoiding the vulnerability of being found, of being seen fully in your ordinary humanness, of allowing yourself to matter before you've become everything you think you should be. The courage, then, isn't in the searching, but in the landing, in choosing, really choosing, to be here in this relationship, in this career, in this body, in this life, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Not because you've exhausted all other options, but because you've recognized that depth requires commitment, and commitment requires accepting limitation, and accepting limitation is how you transform potential into actual living. This doesn't mean giving up on growth, but understanding the difference between growth that emerges from self-acceptance and growth that emerges from self-rejection. And one is expansive, curious, alive, while the other is contracted, anxious, performative. One asks what wants to emerge, and the other demands what's wrong with me that I haven't emerged yet. It means reframing the search itself, not as a problem to be solved, but as a human tendency to be understood. Because of course you search, you're alive, aware, capable of imagining alternatives to what is. The question isn't whether to search, but what the quality of your searching reveals about your relationship with yourself. Whether you're exploring or escaping, whether you're expanding or abandoning. It means building a different relationship with your restlessness, not trying to fix it or transcend it or overcome it, but meeting it with curiosity. What is this feeling trying to tell me? What am I afraid to acknowledge? What would it mean to stay with this discomfort instead of immediately reaching for the next distraction, the next goal, the next version of myself that might finally feel like enough? And maybe, in that staying, you discover something unexpected, that the restlessness was never a problem to be solved, but an invitation to pay attention, to notice what you actually value, what you actually need, what your life is actually asking of you, beneath the noise of what you think you should want. This is how you learn to land, not through force or discipline, or one more perfectly executed plan, but through the simple, radical act of being here, of meeting this moment, this imperfect, ordinary, unremarkable moment, with the full weight of your attention, of allowing yourself to matter before you've arrived at wherever you think you're going. Because here's the truth beneath all the searching. You've been here all along, and home was never a place you had to find, but the place you kept leaving in search of something you already were. The searching doesn't end, but its meaning transforms, and it becomes exploration rather than escape, curiosity rather than compulsion, a way of engaging with life rather than a way of avoiding it. And in that transformation, you finally arrive, not at perfection, not at the end of wanting, but at the simple, profound recognition that you were never actually lost. You were just learning to land.